They say age makes you softer, easier to bend, but my truth is that age sharpens you if you've lived long enough. I'm Margaret, born in 1946 in Melbourne, Australia. Back in my early 70s, my own daughter and her husband tried to convince the world I was unfit to handle my life. I felt betrayed, but then something happened. I heard the truth straight from my granddaughter's lips. Today, at 79, sitting in my garden with the sun slipping behind gum trees, I'm finally sharing this because silence only feeds betrayal. If you're listening, drop your city below and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs courage. It was a Wednesday evening, cool and quiet, when Amelia walked into my sitting room. Her little hands fiddled with the hem of her school jumper, and her face carried a seriousness I'd never seen before. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice shaking, "Mom and Dad are going to take your inheritance. They said you're too old now and they'll get a lawyer to help them." My heart thumped so loudly I could hear it echo in my ears. At first, I thought Amelia must have misunderstood. But then, as she explained what she'd overheard, I realized she wasn't mistaken. Charlotte, my daughter, and Adrian, her husband, had been plotting behind closed doors, scheming to have me declared incompetent so they could seize everything I had worked for. I sat frozen, Amelia's words tightening around my chest like a vice. Suddenly, the last few months began to make chilling sense. Their sudden, frequent visits that I had once mistaken for care, the pointed questions about my will, the suggestions to sell my home because it was too much for someone my age, and Adrian's persistent offers to help organize my financial records. At the time, I had brushed it off as them being helpful. But Amelia's warning cracked everything open. I forced a smile for Amelia's sake, pulling her into my arms as she trembled. "Thank you for telling me, darling," I whispered, though inside my hands were trembling. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had felt before, because this wasn't coming from strangers or neighbors. This was my own daughter, the child I raised, now weaving plans to strip me of my dignity. That night, sleep avoided me. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, every conversation with Charlotte replaying in my mind. Her words now carried different meanings. "Mom, you should really simplify your life. Don't you think a retirement village would be safer? Let Adrian handle your accounts, you don't need the stress." Each memory burned like acid. They hadn't been checking on me, they had been testing the waters, measuring how easily I could be pushed aside. I remembered one particular afternoon, just a month ago, when Adrian leaned back in my kitchen chair and said casually, "You know, Margaret, money can be tricky to manage at your age. People get scammed. It might be best if someone younger looked after things for you." I had laughed it off, telling him I was perfectly fine. But now, with Amelia's revelation, his comment felt more like a rehearsed step in a larger plan. The next morning, I watched Amelia eat her breakfast, her small frame perched at the table, her eyes starting toward me with concern. I knew then that I couldn't crumble. If I allowed Charlotte and Adrian to take control, Amelia's future would also be stolen. She was the only one in that house who still had a heart that beat honestly. I stroked her hair and promised silently that I would protect her no matter what it took. I decided that day to start looking at my life not with blind trust, but with sharp eyes. I pulled out old letters from the bank, reread property deeds, and checked the locks on the cabinets where I kept important documents. It was shocking how easily someone could slip in and take control if you let them. My hands shook as I held the papers, but not from weakness this time, from determination. That evening, Charlotte dropped by unannounced. She brought a pie, her smile stretched too wide, her voice sugary. "Mom, how are you? Have you thought more about selling the house? Adrian and I could help with the transition, you know." I forced a gentle laugh, but my eyes searched hers, seeing the layers of manipulation I had once ignored. I played along, nodding and thanking her for the pie, but inside, I was studying every word, every gesture. When she left, I stood by the door for a long time, pie untouched on the counter. My chest was heavy with sorrow. How had my daughter grown into this? But sorrow soon shifted into something sharper, resolve. If they thought I would sit quietly while they stripped away my independence, they had gravely underestimated me. From that night, I began keeping a journal. Every conversation with Charlotte and Adrian, every suspicious suggestion, I wrote it all down. The dates, the exact phrases, the subtle looks exchanged between them. It wasn't just for me, it was for Amelia too. If they wanted a battle, then I would make sure I was armed with truth, not just anger. One Sunday, when Adrian called to ask if I needed help with my bills, I smiled into the phone, thanking him warmly, while jotting down his words in the journal. I had learned long ago that the most dangerous enemy isn't the one who storms through your front door, it's the one who knocks politely and walks in with a smile. As days passed, Amelia and I shared a silent understanding. She would give me small updates, but she overheard when her parents thought she wasn't listening. Mom said they'd talk to a lawyer next week, she whispered one night. Each update was like another piece of a puzzle clicking into place. I hugged her tightly, knowing she was risking her parents' anger just to protect me. The betrayal stung deeper each day, but with every sting came clarity. They wanted me to look weak, confused, incapable. But I wasn't any of those things. I was wounded, yes, but I was also awake now, more awake than I had been in years. I sat in my living room one evening, Amelia tucked into my side, and whispered to myself, if they think I'm going to hand them my life on a silver platter, they've got another thing coming. My voice trembled with both fury and strength. The fight hadn't begun yet, but in my bones I knew it was coming. And I was ready to meet it head-on. The morning after Amelia whispered the truth into my heart, I woke with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. I brewed my tea, the steam rising in fragile spirals, and told myself this was no time to falter. Charlotte and Adrian thought they were dealing with an old woman too weary to fight. They were wrong. I had lived through harder storms than this one, and I wasn't about to let my granddaughter's future be gambled away. The first step was clarity. I needed someone outside my circle, someone who could guide me without bias. That's when I thought of Harold Whitmore, the lawyer who had once been my late husband's friend and advisor. He had helped us buy our first home in St. Kilda, had seen us through tax audits and loan negotiations. If there was anyone who could untangle this mess, it was Harold. I rang his office, my hand shaking only slightly as I dialed. When his familiar baritone answered, warmth rushed through me. "Margaret," he said, "it's been too long. What can I do for you?" I hesitated for a moment, ashamed that I even had to speak the words. "Harold, I need your help. It's Charlotte and Adrian. They're plotting. They want me declared incompetent so they can take control of my estate." There was silence, then a slow sigh on the other end. "I've seen this before," he said gravely. "You're not overreacting. If they're meeting lawyers, they may well try to file for guardianship. But we can get ahead of them." We arranged to meet the very next day in his office overlooking the Yarra. I walked into the building with my back straight, even though my stomach twisted. Harold greeted me with a firm handshake, his silver hair catching the morning light. He looked over my notes, the journal entries, Amelia's whispered accounts, and nodded approvingly. "Good start," he said. "Documentation will be key. We'll need evidence that you're sound of mind and perfectly capable of managing your affairs. I'll arrange for you to be evaluated by a medical professional, not because you need it, but because their report will shut down any claim that you're incompetent. We'll also update your will and place your assets into a trust managed by professionals, with Amelia as the ultimate beneficiary." Hearing his plan steadied me. For the first time since Amelia's confession, I felt like I wasn't just waiting for the axe to fall, I was preparing my own armor. Still, there was another layer I couldn't ignore. Something in my bones told me Charlotte and Adrian weren't simply dabbling, they were serious. And serious people leave trails. Harold must have read my mind, because he leaned forward and said, "I'll give you the number of someone I trust. A private investigator. He can discreetly find out what your daughter and her husband are up to." I hesitated. Hiring an investigator felt extreme, even cruel. But then I pictured Amelia's wide, frightened eyes. I couldn't afford to be gentle. "Do it," I said. That week, a man named Oliver Grant visited me. He was polite, dressed in a neat navy suit, and spoke with a calmness that reassured me. "Mrs. Harding," he said, "my job is to gather the truth. Nothing more, nothing less." I handed him the scraps I had, dates of Charlotte's visits, Adrian's comments, Amelia's overheard whispers. Oliver nodded, jotting notes, then promised to keep me informed. I watched him leave with a sense of quiet relief, as though I had placed part of my burden onto stronger shoulders. The days that followed were a strange blend of normality and tension. I cooked my meals, tended my roses, and walked along the beach with Amelia on weekends. Yet underneath it all, I was waiting for Oliver's updates, waiting for Charlotte and Adrian to make their next move. One evening, as I sat by the fireplace, Oliver called. His voice was low, measured. "They've been in Sydney, meeting with lawyers who specialize in elder law. I have recordings, Margaret. They discussed having you institutionalized, selling your home," and he paused, "and sending Amelia to boarding school overseas." The words slammed into me like a tidal wave. My throat tightened, my grip on the phone white-knuckled. "Amelia?" I whispered. "Yes," Oliver confirmed. "They see her as an obstacle, a distraction. If you were institutionalized, they'd have free rein. Boarding school removes her from the equation." For a moment, the room spun. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, wanted to exile her child, my only granddaughter, to clear the path for greed. The betrayal cut so deep I felt it in my bones. But with the pain came fire. If there had been any part of me still reluctant to fight, it died in that moment. I thanked Oliver, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "Send me the recordings," I said. "Every single one." The next morning, Harold played the files on his office computer. Charlotte's voice filled the room, cold and calculated. Adrian's laughter followed, sharp as broken glass. Their words painted a picture of me as a burden, a weak old woman who needed to be handled. Harold leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight. "This," he said, "is more than enough. They've hung themselves with their own rope. We'll secure your assets immediately." By the end of that week, my will was rewritten. A trust had been established, Amelia placed at its heart, managed by professionals who owed nothing to Charlotte or Adrian. My accounts were secured, passwords changed, documents moved to a safety deposit box. I also authorized Oliver to continue monitoring them, just in case. At home, I began taking smaller, practical steps. I changed the locks, quietly moved my most valuable jewelry to Amelia's future trust vault, and cleared my desk of any documents Charlotte might recognize. When she and Adrian returned from their trip, they would find things had shifted. Amelia noticed the changes, of course. One evening, she looked up at me as I folded laundry and asked softly, "Grandma, are we safe now?" I cupped her face in my hands, my heart aching for the childhood being stolen from her by her parents' schemes. "We're safer, my love. But we must stay strong a little longer. Promise me you'll keep trusting me, no matter what Mom and Dad say." She nodded solemnly, as though she understood more than a child her age should ever need to. Weeks passed, and my resolve grew. Each time Charlotte called to ask if she could come by, I answered politely but cautiously, knowing every word could be twisted later. I began rehearsing what I would say when the time came to confront them. Not rage, not screaming that would give them the picture they wanted. No, I would use truth, evidence, and calm strength. And beneath it all, I nurtured something even deeper, a quiet pride. They thought they could outwit me, corner me into surrender. But here I was, standing taller than I had in years, sharpening my mind, protecting Amelia's future. I knew the confrontation was coming soon. Oliver's latest report confirmed that Charlotte and Adrian were returning, emboldened by their meetings and convinced of their plan's success. I stood in my kitchen, sunlight pouring through the window, and whispered to myself, "Come then. You'll find I'm not the fool you think I am." The pieces were in place. The evidence was secured. My home was no longer open ground. It was a fortress. And I was ready, truly ready, to face the two people who had once held my trust in their hands and chosen to crush it. The day Charlotte and Adrian returned, the air in my house felt charged, like a storm waiting to break. I had changed the locks while they were away, a decision that left me both nervous and satisfied. When they arrived, they stood at my front step, rattling the handle, frowns etched deep into their faces. Adrian knocked, sharp and insistent. I opened the door only slightly, keeping the chain in place. Their eyes widened in surprise. "Mom, what's going on?" Charlotte demanded, her voice already pitched with irritation. I held her gaze, calm but firm. "Things have changed," I said evenly. "If you want to talk, we'll do it inside, but only with respect." They exchanged a glance before I unlatched the chain and allowed them in. Adrian stepped forward as though he owned the place, but I motioned for him to sit at the dining table. Charlotte perched beside him, her arms crossed tightly. I set a small recorder on the table and pressed play. Their own voices filled the room, the recordings Oliver had provided. Adrian's laughter, Charlotte's cold words about institutionalizing me, about selling my home, about sending Amelia away. The sound seemed to bounce off the walls, heavy and undeniable. Charlotte's face was drained of color. Adrian shifted uncomfortably, his bravado faltering. "Where did you get this?" he snapped, his tone brittle. "That doesn't matter," I replied, my voice steady. "What matters is that I know everything. Every word, every plan. You wanted to take my home, my freedom, my granddaughter's future. But I'm not powerless, and I'm not alone." Charlotte's lips trembled before she spoke. "Mom, you don't understand." "No," I interrupted, my voice sharp enough to cut the air. "I understand perfectly. You saw my age as a weakness. You thought you could strip me of dignity while lining your own pockets. That is not misunderstanding, Charlotte, that is betrayal." Adrian tried to recover, leaning back in his chair. "This doesn't change the fact that you can't manage all this forever. You'll need help eventually." I met his gaze, my eyes unwavering. "That may be true. But it won't be you. I've updated my will. Everything I own now rests in a trust for Amelia, managed by professionals. You have no control, no access, and no say." Charlotte gasped, tears springing to her eyes. "Mom, how could you?" I leaned forward, my voice low but firm. "How could I? How could you, Charlotte? You plotted to throw me into an institution. You were ready to send your own daughter away just to reach my bank accounts. I didn't close the door, you did." For a long moment, silence hung between us. Then I slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of the trust documents, medical evaluations proving my mental clarity, and letters from Harold confirming the legal safeguards in place. "These are my terms," I said. "From now on, there will be no financial support from me. No help with my accounts. No secrets. If you want to remain in my life, it will be with honesty and respect. Amelia will visit, yes, but I will decide when and how. I will not allow you to manipulate her or use her as leverage." Charlotte's tears spilled over, her face crumpling. "Mom, please." But I didn't let her finish. "You wanted to take everything from me, Charlotte. Instead, I've given you something else, boundaries. You may not like them, but they will protect us all." Adrian scoffed, muttering under his breath, but one look at me silenced him. He saw now that the timid old woman they thought they could bully no longer existed. In her place sat someone unshakable. In the weeks that followed, the tension between us simmered. Charlotte and Adrian tried to smooth things over, suggesting family dinners, offering apologies laced with excuses. I allowed contact only on my terms, with Amelia's well-being always at the center. She visited for spring break, her laughter once again filling my house with warmth. I let Charlotte borrow a small amount for a house deposit, but made it clear it was an advance against any future inheritance, nothing more. The balance of power had shifted, and they knew it. I no longer feared their schemes, for they had lost the element of secrecy. The evidence remained locked away, ready to be used if they dared try again. And though a scar remained one that would never fully heal, I had reclaimed my peace. One evening, Amelia and I sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in streaks of orange and purple. She leaned her head against my shoulder and whispered, "Grandma, you saved us." I kissed the top of her head, tears pricking my eyes. "No, my love. We saved each other. And that's something no one can take away." Moral lesson: sometimes love demands boundaries. Protecting yourself is not cruelty but wisdom, ensuring dignity, trust, and legacy remain untouched by betrayal. If you felt this story, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with friends, and comment your lessons below.